Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Reunion and Parents Weekend at Homecoming. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our all virtual event this year. We have a very exciting, very special panel that we've assembled for today's lecture, this morning's lecture, which is titled Lives and Legacy, Celebrating Japanese American Women at Cal. It's a really great panel spanning the generations, really, of Cal history. So we're really glad to have them here today. And thank you for joining us. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. First, please note that we are recording this event, and so this will be recorded, and we'll be posting it later on our YouTube channel. So that's great. And secondly, for just for the best sort of quality of the sound, we're asking everyone to please keep your audio muted. Of course, unless you're one of the guests who is speaking. We encourage you to use the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you have any questions or comments. We are scheduled to run until 12:30, so we'll do our very best to get to your questions and comments. We may not have enough time, but we hope we can get to as many, if not all, by the time of the end of our talk. So I will now, without further ado, turn it over to Lisa. Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Suchitani, and I am a continuing lecturer in the Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies program of the Department of Ethnic Studies here at UC Berkeley. I also serve as board chair of the Japanese American Women Alumni of UC Berkeley, a chartered club of the California Alumni Association since 1992. You know, the mission of our chapter is to inspire and support Asian American women as learners, as leaders, and as contributors to local and global communities in the spirit of our founding Japanese American Women Alumni. You know, our scholarship program has granted over 160 undergraduate and over 70 graduate fellowships since its inception in 1966. Now today, as we celebrate 150 years of women at UC Berkeley, I am really honored to be part of this historic multi-generational panel of Japanese American women who will be sharing stories about their student experiences at Berkeley. Our first panelist this morning is Dr. Joyce Takahashi, a member of the class of 55, an emerita adjunct professor at UC Davis. Joyce received her PhD in chemistry from UCLA and is co-author of more than 40 scientific publications. A member of the board of directors of the Japanese American Women Alumni of UC Berkeley, she wrote the monograph, Japanese American Alumni of the University of California, Berkeley, Lives and Legacy. For over 15 years, she has volunteered with the Time of Remembrance program at the California Museum in Sacramento. For almost 60 years, Shirley Muramoto, class of 77, has performed and taught the Japanese koto both here in the United States and in Japan. She's the founder of the Murasaki Ensemble, a world jazz band, and producer of Hidden Legacy, Japanese traditional performance arts in the World War II internment camps, a documentary based on her research about Japanese traditional arts in World War II concentration camps. Nina F. Ichikawa, class of 2000, is executive director of the Berkeley Food Institute here on campus. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies, Food Policy, and her Master of Arts in International Relations, Food Policy from Meiji Gakuin University in Tokyo. She previously served in the office of U.S. Senator Daniel K. Inouye and worked on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative. In 2011, Nina was named a Food and Community Fellow by the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. A fifth-generation Japanese American, Serena Kuhn is a third-year undergraduate student studying civil and environmental engineering and creative writing. In 2018, she received a Scholastic Art and Writing Gold Medal Portfolio Award. A senior staff writer at the Daily Californian, her work has been published in the Daily Cal, the Rafu Shimpo, and the Berkeley Fiction Review. So Joyce, I'm wondering if you would like to start our discussion off today by telling us a bit about your reasons for coming to Cal and what student life was like for you.
Myself. My reasons for coming to Cal. At the dawn of the 20th century, my grandfather, Joyce Takahashi, was a tailor, and my grandmother, Shizuku Higuchi, was a teacher in the Quaker school in Tokyo. They married in Japan and then immigrated to Berkeley specifically because of the university. My grandmother wanted to ensure that her future children would have a chance to go for a college education. And the next photo shows what happens over the next 20 years. They had 12 children, and my grandmother's wishes became a reality. This is a picture that appeared in the Cal Monthly in 1937, and it celebrated the family that had the largest number of graduates from UC Berkeley, some with multiple degrees. It was fortuitous, though, that the School of Optometry just opened. And so my father was in the second graduating class, and my Auntie Mary was the second woman graduate. In all of this generation, 5 of my aunts and uncles became optometrists, and they wanted to serve in the Japanese American communities throughout California. This picture was taken apparently when my grandmother was honored as Mother of the Year by the University Mothers Club, and it is said that she sat next to President Robert Gordon Sproul. The next photo shows our family. I'm going to there was something on my screen. This was taken in 1937 approximately. My father and mother are in the second row next to my grandfather and grandmother. They actually are, my mother was also a Berkeley graduate, although she got her degree in 1930 from the UC training school at Parnassus for nurses. And she had a degree in public health nursing. But when she tried to get a job, they wouldn't hire her. They said, we could hire you, but we think others may not want to come to you. Public schools weren't hiring Nisei teachers either. My mother and father built a house near my grandparents' house, and it was strategically located so that my father could easily take public transportation to Japantown and San Francisco, where he had an office before World War II. And it was also convenient to the Dwightway bus that would take people up to Telegraph Avenue so that they could go to the University of California. There are 2 children in this picture. They are my older sister, Ellen, and myself. We're in the lower right-hand corner. And we would later be going to the University of California. So the next slide shows what happened in 1942. Not too many years after the photos were shown, that I was showing you, my mother's public health nurse's degree was in great demand when we were incarcerated, first in Tamparan, then in Topaz. Later, we relocated to Chicago before returning home to Berkeley in 1945. Our house had been left in care of the Holmbergs, who took care of it beautifully. 3 years after we came back from the camps, my sister went to Cal and I went to Berkeley High. The next slide shows the cover of a magazine called Scene Magazine. This was like the Life magazine. It was geared towards Japanese Americans with articles presumably of interest to Japanese Americans. This is the cover of the December 1949 issue. And in that issue, they had a 10-page, 20-photo spread on the University of California, Berkeley. And the photographer chose my older sister, Ellen, as a typical Nikkei student. I've taken 3 of the 20 photos to show you. So the next one shows my sister and her friend Helen Yamanashi Kato in an iconic pose. And I think we've all probably stood in that place and had a picture taken of us. The picture after that shows my sister in front of the Japanese Women's Club located on Hearst Avenue. That club was purchased in 1937 by the women, the alumna, and the students following a series of fundraising events. And the reason it was important to have this clubhouse is because the women were finding racial discrimination when they tried to find housing at Berkeley in the 20s and the early 30s. So this house was served as this, in this purpose from 1937 to 1967, when it was sold, and the money which is used to sponsor the scholarships that Lisa was mentioning for our club. The next slide shows the comparable men's dorm. It was founded in 1923, and the students shown here are Richard Tanaka, Pat Uehara, and Carol Nobe. I show this picture particularly for Serena because I believe Pat Uehara is her great aunt. That house was also sold in 1967. It was sold to the Berkeley Student Co-op. And the money from that house is also in a scholarship fund administered by the California Japanese American Alumni Association, CJAAA. So we have two scholarships that are were financed by the sale of these dormitories. I think that's the end of my pictures. So we can return to the screen here. So the question was, what was life like on the campus while I was there? I was there from 51 to 55. I continued to live at home, but by now my friends were able to live in university-sponsored dormitories, such as Ritter, Stebbins. There was even a Buddhist dorm, and they continued to live at the Japanese Women's Students Clubhouse. During the first 2 years on campus, I regularly met other Nikkei women on the steps of the Campanile, and we would eat our brown bag lunches. We studied in Do Library at the long tables. However, by the third year, the students in the health sciences went to the San Francisco campus, and I was spending time on the campus up the hill in the chemistry laboratory and library, and my classmates became my community. This was all before, if you can imagine, before the IT phenomena. So we carried slide rules, we had logarithmic tables, we used payphones in phone booths. Everything was in hard copy. There were, if you can imagine life before the personal computer, that's the life we led. However, I had no idea of what I would be doing after UC Berkeley, probably something that was related to physical sciences or math. I became interested in chemistry because on a Saturday morning, the instructor was talking about the three-dimensional properties of molecules and the mechanisms of organic reactions related to the three-dimensional features of molecules. So, and I also enjoyed the hands-on nature of the laboratories. By that time, schools were hiring teachers of color. So I thought I could teach high school math and physical sciences. And I did student teaching that summer. However, in my senior year, I overheard my classmates talking about going to graduate school. And so I decided that maybe I should apply for graduate school. But I didn't see any women in the faculty at Cal in the physical sciences or math. And so I did find one woman who was the head of the home economics department. Her name was Agnes Faye Morgan. She actually had a PhD in chemistry and was on the faculty at home ec. So I talked to her to find out if there was a logical or any other reason why there weren't that many women, and the fact there were no women on the faculty. She told me that she encouraged me to go to graduate school. I guess she was thinking of the future. And it was a little late in this academic year. So I applied to 3 graduate schools, hoping to get into one. To my surprise, all 3 accepted me, and I chose UCLA. I was in a class of 24, 3 of us were women. And I was fortunate to be accepted as a graduate student by a brilliant Canadian Jewish leader in the area of organic reaction mechanisms. And that's the end of the question that you asked me, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for those amazing stories you've shared with us. And hopefully we'll be able to follow up with you a bit more about what those experiences were like in greater detail. Shirley, I'm going to turn to you next and ask you a little bit about what campus life was like for you when you were a student at Cal.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Did that work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. Oh, I've been having so many technical difficulties this morning. My experience at Berkeley was quite different from Joyce's. I mostly went there because my dad encouraged me. I have 5 siblings in my family, and I'm the eldest. So he said, "You have to go to college." I'm a musician. I played the koto. That was my focus. And so I thought, why do I have to go to college? But my dad encouraged me to go, and it actually turned out to be a good thing. I actually went to junior college first to try to save some money by taking all my general ed classes at Merritt College and Laney College, and then transferred to Berkeley in 1973. And at that time, I felt like going there was the campus was going through a crossroads. Ethnic studies had just started about 5 years before that as a result of the Third World Liberation Movement. I benefited from the struggle and that students went through to have a more diverse program of classes, teachers, and students at San Francisco State first in 1968, and then later at UC Berkeley. So I took some ethnic studies classes while I was there. One of them was an Asian American histories class. I believe Ron Takahashi was one of the professors. And I also took language classes because I felt, if anything, I wanted to learn how to speak Japanese. I'm Sansei, which is an American of 3rd generation Japanese descent. And because I played a Japanese instrument, I wanted to know a little bit more about the music I was playing. I couldn't read Japanese, I couldn't speak in Japanese. And so it was an interesting time. I ended up majoring in Oriental language at Berkeley, which was separate from ethnic studies. I could get a degree, a bachelor's degree in Oriental language, but not in ethnic studies. I did a little background research, and I found out that at that time, there were 2 main entities, right? Letters and science, and then the professional colleges and schools. But ethnic studies was not considered, was not under those 2 categories. They had to report directly to the chancellor. So I wondered why the classes I took at ethnic studies didn't count for as many units as the classes I took in Oriental language. And I really wanted to learn more how to speak in Japanese. The Oriental language department concentrated on classical Japanese. And most of the professors there were white. Right? Most of the professors in my Japanese classes in ethnic studies were Japanese. So I thought that was kind of an interesting contrast. I even took a Cantonese class in ethnic studies. because most of the Chinese and Chinese Americans here spoke Cantonese. So since language was going to be my major, I decided to take various Asian languages. I took Mandarin at Merit as well. Let's see, I guess I can also say that I was sort of a reluctant student, as you can kind of imagine. So I don't have any photos of me on campus. I was working my butt off all the time. I never went to any football games, and I didn't have time to get involved with anything else because I just was studying so hard it was hard for me to keep up academically. But I kept at it. I was an average student, and so I was working 2 part-time jobs. I worked at the language lab at the basement of Grinnell in between my classes, and then in the evenings I worked at Capo's department store. I know no one knows what that is, but it's sort of like a Macy's of that time. And so I had to work 2 jobs even to keep afloat. So I was quite busy. I thought, well, the computers were starting to come in at that time, and we had one large mainframe computer at the bottom of barrows that we all had to stand in line to use. And if you made a mistake, you had to stand in the back of that line again. I typed my papers on campus sometimes. I had to put 25 cents in the typewriter for 30 minutes, and then right when you're in the middle of it, it would stop, and then you'd have to put another 25 cents in. One of the unusual things I did while I was at Berkeley was that I joined the Army ROTC for a couple of quarters. At that time, it was a quarter system. Now it's semester. And I didn't join it because I wanted to. My then boyfriend was part of the program and was getting his tuition and books that way. And it just so happened they opened it for women for the first time when I went with him. So he said, you don't want to join, do you? So it was like a dare. So I joined. and actually it was a pretty interesting experience because I had to take classes on strategy of battles. Since I'm also smaller than the average American woman, they had no fatigues for me, no boots. I had to go to Treasure Island to get fitted. Things like that. I had my own barracks to myself when we went on field training exercises. They didn't know what to do with me. It was really kind of interesting. And even cadence, when they go, ya da 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 da, they were all like, derogatory to women. So every time they started doing that, they look at me and go, oh, we can't say that one. Oh, we can't say that one. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't have brought that one up. But I did want to mention that in my Oriental language classes, I did notice other senseis in there as well. So I felt that people like me, 3rd generation Japanese Americans, also were starved to find out more about their language, their culture. The narrative I learned from studying Japanese arts in the camps was that because we were looked at as not American, when they came out of camp, they became like 110% American, and they put away all the cultural Japanese things, which meant not knowing anything about our heritage, and they didn't want to accent in your English. So so that's why we ended up there trying to learn some Japanese. Did you want me to stop? Okay. I know one other thing Lisa did ask me was how I benefited from Oriental language being in that department. I did meet one of my lifelong friends, Mary Adi Ma, in that class. She was also the 3rd generation Sansei, kind of parallel to me because she grew up learning odori, the classical dancing. So we would be talking. My background history in playing koto is that my mom learned how to play the koto when she was a little girl in camp during World War II. And I thought, wow, that history, she told me camp. So for a long time, I thought she meant she learned in summer camp. she didn't learn in summer camps. She learned in the camps during prison camps during World War II. And I'd ask her if she knew anybody else who had this experience. And she said, oh, I think I'm the only one who had this experience. So for a long time, I just let that be my the facts in my head. But then Mary told me that her teacher, Bando Mitsusa, in Tule Lake, taught 140 students in Tule Lake, had her own barracks for her studio, and even had a photo of it at Tule Lake. And so that just kind of opened my eyes and started me wondering how much of this was going on in the camps. So I it took me from then till we produced the documentary film in 2014. So about 40 years span to try to gather interviews and stories from people who had actually taken odori, music, not just koto, shamisen, right? Sang shigin, which is intense singing Chinese poetry. And I have that on a documentary film that I just released on YouTube if you're interested in looking at that later. Okay, so.
Thank you so much, Shirley. I failed to mention your documentary is really a significant contribution to the field of Japanese American studies, as is the monograph that Dr. Joyce Takahashi wrote on the history of Japanese American women, lives and legacy. Thank you for those significant contributions to the canon.
Could I say one more thing? I forgot. Sorry. Yeah, I was, I wanted to compare that time that I was in school with what's happening now, because with the Black Lives Matter movement and the civil rights movement, the Me Too movement, there was women's liberation going on at that time. I feel like there is kind of like this cycle that's happening again, which was happening 50 years ago. And so this makes me excited and wondering if, if these movements are going to be a catalyst for the same type of things that happened 50 years ago when ethnic studies was born out of all this. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen from this time on with all this, awareness again. So just wanted to plug that a bit.
Thank you for that, Shirley. Nina, you want to tell us a little bit about what student life was like and what you chose to study while you were here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you, and thanks for including me. I'm amazed that we have 78 people, and I think this is so great. So many people have joined on, and I just wanted to start by thanking all of our foremothers and those that have went to Berkeley before us, and all those who have benefited from and also pushed UC Berkeley to be better with regards to race and gender access. I think that, hearing Joyce Takahashi and others speak about, what we've been through over the decades is just a reminder of what beneficiaries we are, and also how much we have to keep having our public university be accountable to us. So it's really exciting. So I came to Berkeley as a transfer student. My mother and grandmother graduated UC Berkeley in roughly 1968 and 1939, respectively. So there was a lot of family pressure for me to be a third generation, and I was very frustrated. I did not get in on the first or second try. I kept trying, and I ended up getting in as a transfer student, transferring from Diablo Valley College in Concord. When I got in, I became very interested in food policy and international food trade, and I found the major called interdisciplinary studies field major, which still exists, and I think it's such an innovative way that people can look at multiple disciplines, and it's sort of make your own major, but there's a lot of rigor in terms of core courses that will help you look at problems from an interdisciplinary way. And I had really great professors who were studying all kinds of fascinating subjects. They were not necessarily studying food, trade, and food policy like I wanted to study, but they really supported me to navigate that new path, which to my surprise, I was able to make into a career. And I'm back at Berkeley now, directing the Berkeley Food Institute, which works on food and agriculture policy. So that was really fruitful to me, and I was grateful to be a transfer student. I mean, I would say probably my only mistake was trying to rush through it. And similar to Shirley, I was worried about money and working part-time jobs, and I should have probably taken more time and taken more breadth of classes. But I guess as a local and growing up here, I was just watching the clock tick away and my money drain away. So I was rushing through to graduation. I probably should have had more fun. And I think, do you want me to talk a little bit about activities as well, right? And what I did
Anything
outside of studying. Yeah, so again, because I was a transfer student, I didn't have too long on campus, but the first thing I did, I remember when I came onto campus as a junior, was go to the study abroad office and ask about study abroad. I'm fourth generation Japanese American. I had never been to Japan. You know, Japan was very expensive in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of people don't realize that it was prohibitive for a lot of Japanese Americans to go there. And I had never been, so I really wanted to go to Japan for the first time, and I saw study abroad as a way to go. And I was on financial aid, so even better, you know, financial aid could help me get out there. So I was really excited to get into the program, which I did spring of my junior year. And I just recommend it to everybody because I had a mind-blowing experience. I'll never forget getting off the plane and just smelling the air there just smelled so different and foreign and also familiar. And I had a very personal experience meeting long lost relatives, but also professional experience because I visited farms and I got to understand the food system in a different way that influenced me as an American. So, and I ended up returning to the same school that I studied through Berkeley that has a UC transfer relationship. And I returned to that same school as a graduate student with the support of the Japanese government. So that really opened up amazing doors for me. And I don't think I could have afforded to or known how to spend 6 months in Japan otherwise at the age of 19. So I think that was my most influential experience. I would say the other two that I, you know, in my remaining semesters on campus, which was only 3.5 semesters or so, the two experiences I did that I'll never forget was I was part of a group that helped to restart the Nikkei Student Union, which is Nikkei means Japanese American for those of you who don't know. And there had been a group years ago and it was sort of dormant. And we saw that this was would be a different group than a Japanese culture group or a group that's focused on Japan. And similar to what Shirley mentioned, that we were interested in studying or, you know, uplifting our American experience. So that would be called Nikkei Student Union, and have both social get-togethers and cultural get-togethers, but also work on social and political issues our communities cared about. And my co-conspirator in doing this was a woman named Cindy Koga, who is so amazing. And now she's Cindy Koga Simmons. And now she's running also a research and education center at UC Davis, the UC Sacramento Center. So it's great to come back around to people that you met in student activism, and now you become colleagues and friends as adults. So we restarted Nikkei Student Union, and I also was very active in REACH, which is the Asian American Recruitment and Retention Center. And we were focused on opening up enrollment to more Southeast Asian and other underrepresented Asian American students at Berkeley. And that was we met in Eshelman Hall, and I just have such fond memories, and I met lifelong friends through REACH. And what was great also, and I miss, is that the different Asian American and other student groups, we sort of shared a big space together. So I met the students from Filipino American health careers, you know, South Asian groups, and, you know, a lot of different groups. We were sort of friendly and support each other. But our group was really focused on tutoring, and we worked with a group called East Bay Asian Youth Center in Oakland to do tutoring and events to, again, open the door of access to more students to come to Berkeley in the same way that others had opened it for us before. So it was a largely East Asian group, but we saw that the current challenge was to get in Southeast Asian students. So fond memories of that. Like others, I was not involved in sports. I think I've never been to a football game, sorry. And but I have such fond memories, and I'm very grateful for my education. And I've begun getting my 4-year-old daughter ready for her eventual enrollment in UC Berkeley. So I'm starting the campaign now, and I'm as you reminded me, Shirley, that sometimes children want to do it, but sometimes you have to force them, right? So wish me luck on that. But really, really grateful to be here. And thanks again to our foremothers for all they've done for us.
Thanks so much, Nina. And I just want to, I didn't realize that you were part of the reinvigoration of NSU and REACH, which are thriving spaces on campus. So thanks for all of that foundational work that you were a part of. I think there are actually a few NSU students in the Zoom room now. So
yeah, you know, we heard that there had been an active chapter before and that it was active on other campuses, UCLA, Santa Barbara or something. And we sort of got competitive, like, why don't we have it at Berkeley? And we need to catch up. And there's so many of us. So, you know, when I meet students today, and they always complain about a hole there, I always say, start a group, you know, just start what's not there, whether it be academic or extracurricular. You know, the entity is always expanding and contracting according to who we are. So I think I love Berkeley for allowing us to leave our mark on it.
well, I have a confession to make, and I'm probably dating myself, but before NSU existed, NSU was called Tomodachi, and I was involved in the founding of that. And that was a bit more cultural in focus, but you know, we were very pan-ethnic, frankly, in the way that we were thinking about that space. So
I think Tomodachi might still be there. I think I've seen signs around.
really?
Still, yeah, I think I've seen signs around, but
Thank you for that.
thank you. Happy to answer any more questions or anything else. Anyway, it's great to see you all. And again, thanks to the now 82 people that are join us, and you know, hope you stay in touch with our alumni group.
Thanks. Well, I'm really pleased to introduce now Serena, who's actually a current student. And I do want to acknowledge, Serena, that we're in the middle of midterms. It's like the end of the 8th week of the semester. So I greatly appreciate your taking the time out to join us on this call, despite everything that you have going on outside of your academics. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about why you decided to come to Berkeley and what that experience has been like for you.
Yeah, first of all, hi everyone. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I didn't always know that I wanted to come to Cal. I think early on in high school, I was being really dramatic and I wanted to go as far away from home as possible, just on the other side of the country, but I'm really glad that didn't work out because I cannot handle the cold. I think just as the time came closer to making my final decision, I just began to realize how good a fit Cal was for me in terms of what I wanted to do in college. It was a good place to study engineering, which was what I was always planning to major in, but it was also really important to me that I could find a place where I could also pursue writing. And I knew that UC Berkeley offers a creative writing minor, and there's a lot of opportunities and great writers that have come from here, and the opportunity to write for the Daily Cal. And so I think that really helped me make my decision. I also like the idea of being far from my home in Southern California, but also knowing that I had extended family nearby was comforting. I think a lot of the benefits that have made me really glad that I made my decision, I didn't realize until after I came here. I've had the opportunity to explore Japanese American history, to take a whole class dedicated to it, which I had never imagined before. And I've been able to do personal research as it relates to my family's history. This spring, before everything closed down, I was actually doing some research at the Bancroft Library, looking through the Japanese Women Students Club archives, and I saw my great aunt's signatures right there on a page. And I think that was a very special feeling for me and an experience that I would not have been able to have had I decided to go anywhere else. I've also really enjoyed just the kinds of classes that are available to me. You know, for the creative writing minor, it hasn't only been just looking at the traditional canon. I've been able to take classes like poetry for the people and literature from ethnic movements to go towards that minor. And I think there are options that are way more in line with what excites me about contemporary literature. And yeah, those are just some of the reasons.
Great, thank you for that. You know, one of the things that we were talking about prior to this call, you know, that the pandemic has certainly changed the ways in which all of us are seeking and building a sense of community, you know, not only on campus, of course, but I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what this historical moment has felt for you as a student.
Yeah, it's quite an adjustment. I think I'm definitely more used to it now than I was in spring. But what I miss most about those pre-COVID days is definitely just the busyness and movement throughout the day, and just the busyness of an open campus. Like I used to walk all around campus for classes, walk to work, maybe some time in the library. My favorite library was Main Stack. I spent some time at the Daily Californian office, and I usually wouldn't make it back to my apartment until evening. And some nights I would walk to the RSF and play basketball with my friends. But now during school time, I mostly just walk between my bedroom and the kitchen and just around my little 800 square feet apartment. And yeah, like this panel, everything is on Zoom. And even in some classes, like I'm taking a data science class right now, where it's completely asynchronous and you just kind of have to pace yourself and make sure that you keep up with pre-recorded videos and assignments kind of on your own. So yeah, I think the situation has definitely made me appreciate and miss a lot of little things that I used to take for granted. Like I really miss side conversations before and after class. It's definitely hard to do that over Zoom and make class friends unless you want everyone in the lecture to overhear your small talk. So I feel very glad and lucky that I already do have some friends in my major and in like my interest areas that I can kind of reach out to and collaborate with. The good thing is that a lot of professors, you know, they're having just as hard a time as the students. And so, at least in my experience, they've been pretty understanding that this is kind of difficult and that focusing on a screen all day can be very tiring. But, you know, apart from academics, I'm still trying to stay engaged with things outside of class and still working at the Daily Californian. And I recently became a student member of the Japanese American Studies Advisory Committee, which has been exciting. Yeah, I just feel very lucky that I am able to continue living in Berkeley with my roommates, because it's comforting to know that we're all sort of going through the same thing together.
Thanks so much for your thoughts on that. I think on this call, we probably have a few prospective students or new or upcoming Golden Bears. I'm wondering if, given your experiences, you'd have any advice for them in how they think about like whether or not to come to Berkeley and how to navigate this space.
I think it is different for everyone, but I think that what I've realized, especially from the pandemic, is that 4 years can go by pretty quick. I mean, I'm not done yet, but just to take opportunities as they come and try to make the most of it. It's scary reaching out to people. I think, especially now that, you know, it's not as simple as just like going to events and like chatting with someone next to you. It's kind of more of a leap, but I think that it definitely enhances your experience here if you have people you can study with, people you can get advice from, and, you know, someone to emotionally rely on as well. So I think finding friends and making a big place feel small is, I think, what makes all the difference.
Great, thank you so much for that. I appreciate your acknowledgement that faculty are struggling as well in managing a virtual classroom. I have to admit, I actually lost I was trying to do a breakout room and I lost all 30 students trying to do that breakout room the other week. And I have to say, I really appreciate the grace and the patience that you all as students continue to afford us as we try and just manage and do all that we can, right, to sustain a sense of belonging and community on campus. So thank you again for being with us today. I'm gonna wrap up. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to close the panel by asking all panelists the following question, and you can just unmute and jump in as you're ready to answer it. And the question is this: how have your experiences at Berkeley shaped who you are today? You can either thumb wrestle to see who goes first, or you could just jump in. But just very quickly, yeah, how do you think Berkeley has shaped who you are today?
Are we going to go in order or?
You can decide.
Go ahead, Shirley.
Well, you know, I feel like I never realized how much Berkeley did shape the way I see the world, especially at the time that I was there when there was all this, you know, hyper awareness of for women, for people of color. And, you know, I came out of basically the 50s and most of the 60s with those stereotype ideas of women having to stay at home and take care of children and the men go out to work. And some of the prejudices that, you know, we were facing just because of what we looked like. So, so that was a really big eye-opening thing to me. At Berkeley, I felt I learned to be more open-minded about people and not judge them about where they came from or who they were. And it was just a lot more wonderful experience to just kind of be you, right? And not think in terms of I wasn't in competition with anybody but myself. So I didn't feel competition that way. I decided to go there and get the most of it, what I could get out of it. And in hindsight, I was able to do that. I learned, even though I wasn't sure I would use classical Japanese later on in life, I've actually used it in my classical koto playing and reading text. I can't read, you know, a newspaper, but it has been, it has stuck with me all these years. And I have been able to use all that and the way people think from a different culture. Yeah, I'm American, so I think American. I didn't realize that so much until I went to Japan and met other women who were going through a lot more than we were, because we were going through women's lib. We were going through the Me Too movement of that day. So I almost ended up married there. But because I realized that I wasn't going to be free to play music the way I'd like to play it, to be myself. The guy that I met, he said I would have to take care of his parents. And I said, how can I do that? I can barely speak to them. So, so it made me realize how American I was. So I came back and I, you know, of course, it makes you understand yourself more too. All these things, ethnic studies helped me with that. Knowing my Asian American history, you know, an understanding of what the struggles were that our parents or ancestors or grandparents went through.
Great.
So it's really helped me understand my place in the world and how I can go out there and make changes, right? For the better, I hope.
Absolutely, for the better. Thanks so much, Shirley. Nina, Joyce, Serena, who wants to go next? Go for it, Nina.
Oh, I was going to say, Joyce, go ahead if you want. Well, I'll throw in something while Joyce is thinking. I'm sure you have a good contribution or idea. Yeah, it's Berkeley has affected me so much, same way as Shirley, in terms of creating my identity. One thing I did that was fun that I didn't mention, I had been getting as a student so involved in Asian American activism, and I thought at that time I might be a high school teacher. And Vietnamese at that time was, I think, the third or fourth most spoken language in California. So I took for a year Introduction to Vietnamese Language at Berkeley, and Berkeley was one of the first US universities to offer Vietnamese language. And that, that was so wonderful. And later I traveled to Vietnam, and I'm really not good at languages, and it was very difficult for me, but it was such an eye-opening experience that brought me closer to a lot of Vietnamese friends and to that beautiful culture and what it can mean. So that just the fact that Berkeley was brave enough when other schools wouldn't even touch something like the language of Vietnam, that we had such a talented teacher and we had so much fun. And I think Berkeley has always been a brave university, and people get braver who go there. And, especially in these times, it's politically difficult. I do try to think back to those that came to Berkeley before, and I try to be brave like them. So.
Thank you, Nina. Joyce, did you want to go next?
Well, mine is a little off the topic, which is the reason I didn't jump in earlier. I wanted to give my appreciation for the Alumni Association, because after I had worked for 30 years and retired, I found Japanese American community within the Japanese American women alumni of UC Berkeley. And that was revived by Dr. Yoshia Togasaki and Elsie Bokal in 1991 to provide oversight over that scholarship that I was talking about that came from the sale of the house on Hearst Avenue. It turned out that Mary Tomita initiated an oral history project, and in connection with the project, we contacted the regional oral history office, and they encouraged us to try to tie together the interviews. Well, we had boxes of artifacts from that house in the Bancroft Library. So between the oral histories, the artifacts, and the internet, the article grew and became our monograph, Lives and Legacy, which is now at Bancroft Library. And it's accessible using the keywords lives and legacy. And my name, Takahashi, you can get that on the internet, or now, just recently, you can get it at the portal, 150 Years of Women at Berkeley Essays. So I really appreciate belonging to the Japanese American Women Alumni of UC Berkeley. Thank you for sponsoring this panel also.
We certainly appreciate you, Joyce. You've been our historian for a number of years and continue to remind us about the importance of honoring and respecting those who came before us, and the resilience and the grace of our pioneers. So thank you for holding us accountable to all of that. Serena, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess academically, at least, from what I've been studying, and especially seeing how COVID has been affecting everything, I've learned here to take a more interdisciplinary approach to things and really think critically about what I'm learning and ask questions about what I'm learning, So like studying environmental engineering, like not just understanding the science, but asking the questions of who's going to be most affected by climate change and pollution, with writing and literature, asking the question of who is telling the story and who has historically been allowed to tell their stories. And with ethnic studies classes, asking why didn't I learn this stuff until college, and how can that be changed for future generations? I also think just what I've realized during my time at Cal is that it's so huge and there's so many opportunities and resources, and there are people to help you out and to get advice from, but a lot of the time you do have to take charge of your experience, what classes you're going to take, what organizations you're going to join, if you're going to do research, even whether or not you're going to take advantage of office hours. So I think sometimes that can be super overwhelming, but for me personally, that independence has taught me to be less afraid to go for opportunities and to pursue projects, because this is kind of a time where we do have resources and people whose experiences to draw from, and you just have to make it happen.
Thank you so much. We're almost out of time. I just want to thank all of our amazing panelists for taking time this morning and sharing your amazing stories of inspiration and resilience. I don't know if you all figured out by now, but they're incredibly humble, and 10 minutes a piece is not enough time to give you the depth and breadth of how amazing these women are. I feel very grateful and honored to have been able to share space with you. I also want to thank all of you for joining us. I see a few familiar faces and names in the participant list. I'm really grateful to be in community with all of you. A couple of things. So Joyce had mentioned a portal or a website where you can learn more about Lives and Legacy, and also the effort of 150 years of women at UC Berkeley to document the stories of women here on this campus. And again, that's www.150w.berkeley.edu. The Japanese American Women Alumni of UC Berkeley also has a website. If you're interested in staying in touch with us and becoming a member, we would love to have you. Our website is jawaucb.org. Please continue to enjoy this weekend of celebration and reunion. And we hope that you also please continue to stay safe and well until we can meet again in person. Again, many thanks for joining us, and Fiat Lux, go Bears.